Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. I hope you're doing great. Today we're diving into one of the most requested topics on my channel, a full, honest review of a setup that I've used for nearly 5 years now, the Thrustmaster T16000M FCS Pack. This was my first full HOTAS and pedals combo, and let me tell you, I've used it for everything. From VFR flying in Cessnas to Airbus flights to full-blown combat ops in DCS, including helicopters by the way. It's been with me through every kind of flight sim experience, and I think I finally earned the right to give it a fair, long-term verdict. I'd also like to mention that this review is not sponsored by Thrustmaster in any way. I bought both units with my hard-earned money. And before we dive in, if you enjoyed this content, leave a like, comment, and share with your friends. Thank you. Let's start with what makes this setup shine, the joystick. Mine still feels like new, and mostly because of the Hall effect sensors. These sensors don't degrade the way cheaper potentiometers do, so you don't get the usual jitter, dead zones, or drift over time. I've used this stick for hours and hours a week, flying the A320, the Comanche, and even helicopters like the UE in DCS. The inputs are still as smooth as day one, which is incredible. It's also loaded with a ton of buttons. You've got enough hats and triggers to bind everything from the trim to the autopilot, the flaps, the gear, to even ATC or views. However, one thing that bugs me is the weight. It's a bit too light. The base, basically, if you are heavy on the stick, it can tilt or lift off the desk. A bit of Velcro or anti-slip mat helps, but I do wish the base had a bit more weight to it. Regardless, you are supposed to be very light on your inputs, so this shouldn't be an issue. Still, for the price, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything better than this for an entry-level HOTAS market. Now let's talk about the throttle quadrant. Definitely the weakest link of the setup. It uses potentiometers, and both units that I've owned started acting up after a while. Ghost inputs, jitters, all the usual analog wear and tear. But, and it's a big but, there is a simple fix. A quick spray of electric contact cleaner into the potentiometers and you're back in business. I did this twice on mine and it's still going strong today. Thanks Caldas for the amazing tip, by the way. What really bothers me still is the physical smoothness. Micro adjusting the throttle during approaches, just forget about it. It rides on a plastic rail basically, and it sometimes feels like it's dragging and it's just stuck. You can tweak the resistance and add some loop to the metal parts, but it's never going to be buttery smooth as you would expect it to be. There are, however, aftermarket fixes, some Etsy mods with steel bearings and all that stuff. You can easily find those. If you search, I can leave a link in the description if you want to buy one of those. And they do actually work and solve this issue for good. Even if you aren't too tech savvy, you can still install them pretty easily, I think. I've tried it on mine. It works wonders. Now on to the pedals, which are part of the same pack, obviously. They are, I think the best word to describe them is they're basic. They are made entirely out of plastic and they feel definitely like the most budget part of the trio. And yeah, they actually do feel like plastic. But they are surprisingly functional. I've never ever had a failure and I use them regularly for both rudder input and for braking. They are very lightweight, but they grip the floor well enough. I fly on a hardwood floor, and with some small rubber pads, they don't slide around. Either that or one of those anti-slip mats that you can put just under them, and they will stick well enough. In helicopters, these pedals actually work just fine for coordinated pedal input, and your inputs can be very precise and very sensitive if your foot coordination is on point, of course. You can't always blame the equipment. Sometimes you gotta blame yourself. And I gotta tell you, the first times that I was using this, I was not precise, I was not sensitive, it was really hard to get used to. On the topic of that, I want to add that if this is your first pedal set, you might be surprised at how difficult and weird it is to get used to. If you don't have any experience on real aircraft that uses, pedals and rudders and whatnot, my first impressions were not good, as I was completely uncoordinated with everything that I was doing. However, after just a week of flying, trying it out, adjusting the position and whatnot, I could safely say that I couldn't fly anymore without these pedals. So just keep that in mind. One thing people don't always mention is how the pack is wired. You've got two USB cables, one for the joystick and one for the throttle. But the pedals, they plug directly into the throttle using its own cable. That means that the entire system runs off of just two USB ports, which is really super convenient. It is also modular in a practical sense. You can use the stick alone, the throttle alone, or the pedals with something else. I've used the stick with the Honeycomb Bravo that I just purchased, and I've also used the throttle while testing the Airbus side stick, and everything just plays well together. Now, on top of the actual review, I want to give you some setup tips and tricks for this particular equipment. You can probably add non-slip pads under the stick and the throttle if you fly aggressively. Like I've said before, the stick is a bit lightweight on the base, and the throttle, I mean, if you really smash it, it probably would drag around the desk for a bit. I haven't really done it myself, but just put some on the non-slip pads under the stick and the throttle and you'll be good to go. It won't go anywhere, and that's perfect. Second tip is bind your reverse thrust to one of the throttle buttons. I use the ones on the back of the throttle, and this makes airline flying much more practical. You don't have a reverse axis on this. The throttle is just a one-way axis. So if you want to reverse, you can use a button. You put the throttle to idle, you engage the button, and then you advance the throttle to advance the reverse thrust. Basically, it flies and feels great and logical. Third tip, and the last, if you fly helicopters, reduce the throttle friction and bind it to the collective. It is not perfect because you don't get the up and down feel of an actual collective, but it works very well, and that served me very well on both Flight Simulator and DCS. Let's talk about numbers. The T16000M FCS Pack usually goes for around 180 to 220 euros depending on where you buy it and if there's a sale going on, of course. For that price, you are getting a full HODA system, joystick, throttle, and pedals, which is honestly very rare in the sim world, especially at this level of quality. If you break it down individually, the joystick alone usually sells for about 70 to 90 euros, the throttle is around 80 euros, and the pedals, if sold separately, can go from 60 to 80 euros more or less. So, as a bundle, if you do the math, you are actually saving money. It's one of the best value starter packs out there, for sure. Especially for beginners who don't want to commit 400 euros or more into initial gear right away. And considering that I've used it for almost 5 years without needing to replace anything, that's some serious value right there. A little maintenance, of course, and this setup can last you a long time, especially if you are not ready to dive into the premium hardware just yet. And always remember, if you take care of your equipment will take care of you. This applies to everything in life, but it also applies to flight sim gear. If you do proper maintenance, if you take care of it, it will take care of you for a long time. So keep that in mind. I also want to answer the question, who is this pack for? If you are just starting out in flight simulation, the T16000M FCS Pack is a no-brainer. It gives you everything that you need to start flying realistically, all in one single box, without the headache of hunting around for compatible components or something that will actually look nice on your desk. It's perfect for intermediate simmers who are looking for a second setup or something that's travel friendly. You can easily put this thing in a backpack and get going. If you are coming from a cheaper setup, you want to upgrade to something more realistic, you get this thing and you're set up for life, just like myself, for example. Helicopter and GA pilots will also enjoy this because it has a precise stick and it has usable pedals, and you know that if you tried flying helicopters without rudder pedals, it is a pain to do so. This pack will solve that issue as well. Even if you are flying on DCS, and somebody that has flown on DCS can agree with me 100%, you can never get enough buttons on DCS. You can have a million buttons to set up, and you're still gonna find something to bind them to. It is crazy the amount of inputs and amount of setup that is required to fly on DCS. And I have successfully flown multiple times on DCS with this pack. There are a lot of buttons on this throttle. Of course, there are more on the market that have a lot more buttons, but this setup had enough buttons for me to bind everything that I needed to fly efficiently on DCS. So if you are looking for something that is a dual solution, so something that you want to be flying, commercial, civil aviation, and then switch to something more military-like, this pack is for you. You can argue and say it's not for hardcore simmers chasing full realism, haptic feedback, or metal yokes and pedals, but for 90% of the sim crowd, especially those on a budget, this thing will absolutely do the job. It's also ideal if you're not really sure what your long-term simming style will be. It gives you the flexibility to try airliners, bush flights, VFR hops, and combat flying, all in one single pack. At the end of the day, there are always alternatives to this. So if you are watching this thinking, is this still worth buying in 2025? The short answer is yes, but it depends on your budget. If you've got a lot more money to spend, you can consider a VKB Gladiator setup, maybe together with a throttle, and get the VKB Gladiator joystick and do this, setup that way. Or you can get the Honeycomb Alpha and Bravo setup and maybe the Charlie. It's a whole other level, that's right, but that's also like double or triple the price. So if you don't have that kind of budget, this is the pack for you. It is still one of the best bang for buck combos out there, no questions asked. So would I still recommend this setup in 2025? I mean, absolutely. I still use it. I just got the Honeycomb Bravo, but I'm still going to be using this setup anyways. I'm going to be using the joystick, the pedals, and I most likely will be using the throttle because of DCS. So yeah, definitely. It is not perfect. It is not perfect at all, but it's reliable, it's upgradable, and it's still better than most cheap options. For beginners or budget-conscious simmers, it delivers a complete flying experience. Stick, throttle, and pedals, all for the cost of one single high-end component. Let me know in the comment section below if you've used this pack or if you're thinking about buying it. I'll be happy to answer any questions or help you decide. As always, safe flights to everyone. See ya!